Okay, so I was originally making a video about coping mechanisms, and I think I still will, but I really felt compelled to do a video about child-free mindset versus antinatalism mindset and my observations about the differences between the two groups as well as the similarities and how each of these groups growing, especially with the child-free movement growing and gaining a lot of traction over the last few years, and how that's, like I said in another video, that is a sign of this simulation coming to an end, or things changing, societal norms changing, and the kind of return to Christ consciousness or a collective conscious awakening occurring, because you have two different sets of people, two different groups of people coming to the same conclusion. The more people you have coming to the same conclusions on issues that impact society at large is an indication of consciousness levels rising, right? But I wanted to talk about the difference between the two groups because I've been consuming a lot of antinatalism content lately, and y'all know that's what I love to do on this channel. This channel is literally like thought dumps for me. Like, I'm always connecting the dots. That's something that is like a favorite, like, passion of mine to do on like the side. I love puzzles, I love mysteries, I love stuff like that. So I've been exploring a lot of antinatalism content because I do find it interesting as someone that is child-free. I would say that I'm more on the child-free spectrum versus the antinatalism spectrum, because from what I've observed about that specific group is that their reasoning is a little bit, not necessarily doomer, but more fatalistic. I wouldn't call it extreme. I think to outsiders it could be, or to NPC, like, people that have like mainstream, I'll call it I don't want to even just say NPC, mainstream thinkers are not going to understand like antinatalists, and they're going to probably view them as like evil. I watched this or listened to rather this really interesting panel discussion that happened years ago with a bunch of Black antinatalists specifically. And one of the things they talked about was how one of the biggest reasons that antinatalism isn't popular with the Black community is because it's almost seen as eugenics or racist, or that's how they view it. Like, oh, it's an attack on the Black race. You don't want to continue the Black race, da-da-da-da. And that's a whole separate rabbit hole that I could go down. And I won't touch on it in this video. Maybe I'll cover it in another video. I have a very particular thought process around the continuation of, like, the Black race. But I won't go into it here because that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is just to talk about the differences between the two different ideologies of a child-free versus antinatalist. So, speaking as an outsider who's been observing the antinatalist space, I feel my biggest observation about antinatalists is a lot of what prompts their choosing that life or that mindset or that ideology is either connected to some deep-rooted trauma that they endured as a child, or some kind of early awakening they had about this planet not being a good place, or not wanting to be here, not wanting to bring another soul here. Like, I think that group of people are so deeply empathetic. They're actually more empathetic and self-aware than natalists, and anyone, and even some child-free, right? I think that antinatalists have thought really deeply a lot of the times about their choice not to bring another child here. There's also like an underlying sentiment of them not wanting to be here, right? I find a lot of antinatalists do promote, self-unaliving, or they're, even if they don't necessarily promote it, they are very sympathetic to it, right? And they're very sympathetic to the pain and suffering of others. And it's not even just limited to human beings, it's also animals, right? I saw an antinatalist interview with South Point Underbelly many years ago, where she was like, she doesn't agree with anything getting birthed, you know, she doesn't agree with, like she was, I want to say, again, I don't want to call anybody extreme, but I think she was like vegan. So, because she was also on the tip of like, you know, caring about the pain and suffering of animals and animals not being able to give consent to being here either and being born here either. And she just didn't agree with the idea of bringing anyone here without their consent. That's an overwhelming sentiment that I see with antinatalists. Now, with the child free, I can honestly say a lot of the reasoning can sometimes overlap, but a lot of the times it's self-motivated. It's more individualistic. It's a little selfish. Selfishly motivated, which I think is a good thing. I think one of the most selfless things you can do is be selfish sometimes. But sometimes it's motivated by wanting to have autonomy over one's life fully. And to a degree, antinatalists are the same way. Like, they also are seeking some level of autonomy, and maybe not even actively seeking it, because they know by default not having children, you're going to have more autonomy over your life and your life choices. So it's not even that they're seeking it, they just know by default they'll have that. With child free, it's like an active seeking of autonomy over one's life to a certain degree by not having children, purposefully not having children. Partnering with someone who also is on the same wave, right? Like, for child free, there is even dating groups for child free. Like, there's a subreddit called Child Free for Child Free, where you can meet other people that have gotten snipped, that are completely against having kids, but they want some level of companionship, partnership. Like, I'm definitely more on that wavelength, where I can see myself having a lifetime companion. Like, maybe we don't even really get married, but we still have some level, like, you know, obviously, like, you're human, you're going to have some level of desires or wants. We're going to have desires and wants until the day that we are up out of here. But I wouldn't mind still having a level of like companionship with someone, but it would need to be understood that you don't want children and I don't want children. Another difference I will say between the two is I've noticed a lot of antinatalists have a lot of compassion for children. Like, they have so much compassion and care for children. They empathize with children so much that, and a lot of times they like children, and that's their reason for why they don't want to bring them here. Like, you know, they don't mind being around children, being auntie, you know, they're not on the delusional tip of, oh, children are a blessing, but they have empathy for them because they're another being. Child free, and I can kind of even include myself in this bucket, a lot of child free don't like kids, right? A lot of child free don't like children. They see them as like a nuisance, annoying. They know themselves well enough to know that they would see it as annoying to have a child. They would see it as a hindrance to have a child. A lot of times, you know, a lot of child free are even getting bold enough to be straight up and be like, I don't want to mess up my body. You know, I don't want to spend my money on somebody else other than myself. You know, I want to be able to travel whenever I want. I want to be able to do whatever. I don't want this other autonomous being having any control over me. You know, I don't want to have a bill for the rest of my life. You know, this is how a lot of child free people talk, and this is how they feel. And I'm including myself in that bucket, right? I've never been someone that gravitated towards children. I've never been someone that like when people would force me to take, oh, here's the new baby, here's the new, like I've never been the one that wanted to hold the new baby. Like I was never interested in the new baby, was never interested in kids. I'm never interested in talking to kids. I would be nice to children if they're talking to me, but I've never been someone that wanted to have a lot of heavy interaction with children. I never wanted to be responsible for a child. Y'all that follow my channel, y'all might be aware that I have a cat, and even having a cat to me is very overwhelming sometimes, because she cries, she wants attention, she's very needy, she's very loving, and she just requires a lot, and it just takes, it's like an energy suck. Like I feel like children are energy harvesters, like. And a lot of child-free people feel that way. A lot of child-free people are child-free because they know they would probably not be the best parents, right? Like I know that I would be able to provide my kid a good life, and I'd go hard to provide my kid a good life because I had a good childhood, but I would not be able to, I don't have the capacity to love a child in the way that they need to be loved. I don't have the capacity to be there emotionally for them, to provide that emotional depth for them. I would be a very emotionally neglectful parent, and my child would resent me. Okay, so, and I know myself well enough to know that. And I feel like that's like a primary difference with child-free. Like a lot of child-free, they just have no interest in having children. They just have no interest in children disrupting their life in any way. And they know themselves well enough to know that that's just not something that they want to do. And I would say that that's really like, whereas like with antinatalists, it's a moral thing a lot of times. This is just from what I've observed. It's like they're thinking of it so deeply on a level that's almost spiritual, which is fascinating to me because so many antinatalists are atheists. Like so many antinatalists don't believe in God at all. Like they are not really spiritual. They're not very woo-woo. They're not into the new age. They're not into, like, I feel like you'd find more child-free people that are spiritual or more spiritually inclined than you would antinatalists, which is, it's interesting to me because so much of the reasoning that antinatalists provide for why they do not want to bring a child onto this prison planet or into this matrix without their consent, so much of the ideology that they express is spiritual. It's very tied to the occult. It's very tied to like Gnosticism, recognizing that this is not a good place, that this is hell, that this is a prison planet, that this is a place in which is governed by consent, and yet you're brought here without, the actual being is brought there without their consent. And then leaving is also something that you need consent for, right? In some cases, depending on where you are. And knowing that this world is also built on duality, which means that regardless of how good of a life you think that you have, speaking of like how natalists will say, oh, like, you know, I have a good life and my kid is going to have a good life, right? When you're cognizant of the fact that this world is governed by the laws of polarity, duality exists, so there's always going to be good and bad, black, white, up, down, left, right. Like there's always going to be the opposite occurring, you know, sometimes simultaneously. So no, you're not going to give birth to a child that's going to have, like, they may have a better life than others, like depending on the socioeconomic conditions that they're born into, but that doesn't mean they're not going to deal with depression. That doesn't mean that they're not going to deal with rejection. It doesn't mean that they're not going to deal with ups and downs. And something fascinating that I found about a lot of people who kind of live in this level of like delusion about the world and what this world is, or they're lying to themselves and how they're navigating this world. I've met people that will swear that they have an amazing life, that they don't need to go to a therapist, that they're not depressed, they've never been depressed, they don't hate their life, they love their life. I've met people like that, but when you really get to know them, they have different voids in their life that they're filling with some kind of vice outside of themselves. That tells me that if that vice did not exist, you would fall into deep depression. Like if you were not numbing yourself with weed, with cocaine, with drinking, if you were not filling some void in your life without some other vice, attention, validation from, the opposite sex, if you didn't have this drug, love, companionship, like if you didn't have some thing outside of yourself that you were filling a void within yourself, if you didn't have that, you would fall deeply into depression, right? That's the only thing that's keeping you out of the full-on depression, is the fact that you have access to some vice or drug, whatever the case may be. And that's what's keeping you from, jumping off the roof somewhere, and that's why you don't even notice that you're using all these external factors to cope, right? They don't even realize it. They haven't reached that level of self-awareness. They just look around the world and see, well, I'm not homeless. I have someone that loves me, or I have money, so I have access to all of these things that the average person doesn't. So that must mean something. I must be happy if I have access to all of these things, right? But when you look deeper under the surface at a lot of those people, they're not, right? And so, related to that, I left a comment on an antinatalist channel that I recently stumbled upon, and her name was Against Life. And this woman, it's a Black woman, antinatalist, and she made a video responding to, it was either a comment or like this highly held belief that detractors have against antinatalists, where they say like, oh, the only reason that you don't want to have kids, or you're against having kids, is because you are like, your life sucks, right? Or you're depressed, and you're like a loser, basically. Like, that's not what she said, but that's summing it up, what the assumption is for antinatalists. And she did this whole video on like her balcony, and it was like overlooking this beautiful view. I mean, it was so nice. So like, clearly she's living well, doing well. And she said, she's like, I work less than 30 hours a week. I wake up when I want. I work when I want. I travel regularly. I live a good life. Like, I live a nice life. Like, she was saying that she lives well enough that she could have children if she wanted to, comfortably. But she said that she was not naive enough to think that just because she has it good, artificially speaking on the outside, that means that she needs to bring a child here, and that child is going to also think that this is a good life and they're living good. And I left her a comment, and mind you, she did this video years ago. I left her a comment and I was like, I agree, and not only is it naivety, it's arrogance. A lot of natalists, or people that choose to have children, are very arrogant to think or assume that because they have it good, quote unquote, they have life good, that their child is also going to interpret this as a good life, and that they're going to have it good, all because they have all of these things on the surface that are supposed to make your life easy and worth living, like money, external validation, resources, all of these things that are supposed to make life worth living. That suddenly is going to, because the child has all the access to everything they could ever want, they're naturally going to be happy, right? Not accounting for the fact that some children have, or people in general, can be born with chemical imbalance. They can be born depressed. They can be sad. They can not feel like material possessions mean anything to them. And they can be in a deep depression, regardless of whatever they were born in, regardless of them being born with a silver spoon in their mouth. But people who choose to have children, natalists, are so arrogant that their mind doesn't even go there. They don't comprehend that. They don't even allow that idea to occur to themselves. That thought doesn't occur to them. And that's why you'll have people that will look around at the state of the world. And this is another thing that I feel like child-free people and antinatalists have in common. Child-free and antinatalists are cognizant enough, like they have enough self-awareness to look around at the state of the world and be like, yeah, I don't think a kid needs to be brought here. Like, you know, based on the fact that like we're in the middle of a war, the economy sucks, plastic is in everything, the food is fake, the people are fake. Like, I don't think I want to bring a child here. I don't want to bring a child here to suffer. You know, I don't want to bring a child here to endure any kind of pain or turmoil, or like, I don't think this is the ideal timeline for children to be coming into. A natalist will be so much living in their own bubble, in their own reality that's very detached from the rest of the world and what's going on, and they'll still think, yeah, I'm gonna have the kid, like I'm gonna bring the kid here, or like, yeah, I think it's a good idea to bring a child here, right? And I saw another creator, Shy the Sage, was like, you know, there has to be something wrong cognitively with humans when even animals, when living under duress, even animals will stop procreating when their living conditions have deteriorated to a certain extent within captivity, or you know, they're just like, they internally recognize it's not safe to have kids. They stop, right? And while birth rates are declining globally, you still have children being born into the projects every day. You still have kids being born into poverty every single day, like abject poverty. And those are the people that I automatically assume are NPCs. And I'm going to do a video about NPCs. I'm going to go more into depth with that. But yeah, when it comes to natalists, you'll have people that they don't see anything wrong with that. And then there's the ones that have the means to raise children that will want to control a woman's ability to conceive, right? To bear children, to bring forth life, that will not even want women to have a choice whether or not they would bring life if the child was created out of hate, like literal hate and like rape, right? Or incest. You have pro-natalists who don't even care about the means by which the child was born into, or what is going to happen to the child when they get here because of how they were born, you know, or the impact it will have on the mother being forced to give birth to something that was created out of force, you know, forced rape, hatred. They're still like, no, like you have to bring this child here, you know, you have to suffer to bring them in, and then that child has to then grow up and endure suffering and pain of having to have been brought about by force. But that's just how I kind of view natalists in a nutshell. I really never planned on touching on them too much in this video. And I know there are some that might say, oh, like I am an advocate for abortion when rape is involved. And that very well may be true. I definitely do think there are some natalists that can be empathetic to pro-choice movement. However, I feel like anyone that decides it's a good idea to bring a child here, you are inherently pro-life, right? Anyone that's going to make the statement of every child is a gift, or, you know, you might have it hard now, but, you know, you'll figure it out. Like I know you're struggling, and I know you're in poverty, and I know that you don't have the means or the funds to raise this child, but you'll figure it out. You'll figure it out, or I'll help you. The whole I'll help you thing. And I talked about that actually in the video about how children keep your soul trapped. The girl that I added her clip, that woman had a child and was struggling bad as a single mom raising a child, and she had someone tell her, I know you're struggling, I know you're having it hard, but if you have at least one more child, then I'll help you. Like, do you understand how sick that is to see someone that was struggling, going through the motions, and then in trying to entice them into having another child, bringing another child into struggle with under the pretense of you're going to help them. Like, what? Like, there's almost something evil about that. and that's how I view like the natalist pro-lifers. Like, for you to really think that your promise of helping an already struggling mother who you could be helping now, she only has one, you can help her even more easily now with just one, but you're telling her to go out and have another one and then you're gonna help? Yeah, no. That those kind of individuals, like, that's not even an NPC, that's a demon. Okay, that's like a demonic person. Okay, but yeah, I think I've concluded the video at this point. I just wanted to do a video drawing the comparisons and then also calling out the difference between the antinatalist group and the child-free. I definitely think the two share a lot in common. However, the overall sentiments or the reasoning behind both groups differs tremendously. And I can definitely see myself going more to the antinatalist side over time. But for now, I definitely heavily identify with the child-free movement, or just the child-free mindset, because I do think that it is less heavily influenced by like a sense of like morality, and it's just more self-focused, because I am on a more self-focused journey. And I can honestly say from the bottom of my heart that my reason for not having children is because I don't want them, and because I am very much focused on myself at the moment, and having a child would take away from that, and I am not interested in that.